views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program host and do not necessarily reflect or represent the views and opinions held by TCN TV Network Incorporated. Due to the social nature of this broadcasting channel, videos may contain content copyrighted by another entity or person. The TCN TV Network claims no rights to the said content. TCN TV Network cannot be held accountable for the copyrighted content. TCN TV Network is a messenger and sharer of information and strives to verify but cannot warrant the accuracy of copyrights or completeness of the information on this program.
With so many newspapers within the community, it's sometimes hard to tell what separates us from the rest. Most of the time, they all brag about the same thing. You know, the large circulations, tons of online views, and it can go on and on. But what really separates the Toronto Caribbean newspaper apart from everybody else? Well, it's simple. Our service. No, seriously. Hi, I'm Grant Browning, founder and CEO of the Toronto Caribbean newspaper. I have over 20 years of branding and marketing experience, and I've worked with countless companies and corporations to do one thing, and that is to raise their profits with their brand. With over 40 years of combined experience in branding and marketing, our amazing staff is fully prepared to sit down and figure out exactly what you need to stand out from your competitors.
The reason why you don't see that anymore is because
the ad is too powerful, bring too much people.
So what are you waiting for? Give us a call today. We'll be happy to help.
Good morning. We're live. Welcome to the Daily Reel, live from the TCN studios here in Brampton, Ontario. I'm your host, Andrew Perry. We apologize for starting a little bit later than usual, guys, but we, as always, appreciate you tuning in. Today, I have the fabulous honor of having Morgan Pierce in the studio today. Welcome, by the way.
Thank
you
you
so much.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate you having having you in to talk about Black Sheep Thinking and you know, your message and how you're helping change entrepreneurs' lives and, you know, other people who are struggling, because this is such a huge topic, guys. Huge. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a realtor, if you're a business owner, somebody who strives for something bigger in their lives, and you're watching this right now, you have probably dealt with, in some sort of way, either on a large scale or a smaller scale, anxiety or maybe depression,
right.
Or maybe you were struggling to find your purpose, or maybe the why, in really trying to determine your life's purpose.
Yes.
Fair to say, right?
Yeah,
so thanks,
100%.
Morgan,
We're all on that journey.
for coming on. And before I get into what is Black Sheep Thinking and you know what your message is,
Sure.
Tell me, you know, how did you get on this path, I guess you could say?
That's a great question. Thank you. So I actually started. Yeah, sure, of course. Thank you. Actually, it started off just by going through a lot of pain. I mean, I went to school for psychology, but most of my lessons in life have come from struggles I faced as a child.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was abandoned by my father when we were really young, 3. And my stepfather came in when I was 5, a military man that was very abusive because he had a tough past himself.
Right.
And so that led, and then at that same age, I got my tonsils out, my heart stopped, and my lungs collapsed.
Oh,
and so that erased all my formative years. So my mom had the heart of a teacher and always wanted to, I was reading National Geographic before that. And so after that surgery and flatlining and being resuscitated, much of the stuff like recognizing colors and numbers have been erased, which eventually led to a learning disability, a diagnosis when I was in school, which was delayed, and then the labels that come with that.
Mm-hmm.
And just growing up, my stepfather eventually became disabled, so growing up with lower income.
Right.
And in my last year of high school, I was assaulted by 3 boys so badly I needed 2 nose surgeries and work on my back. So that was kind of how I started my pre-adult years,
my gosh.
right, where I was.
Yeah, that's you know, obviously we all have things in our lives that happen when we were young, but I mean that's really intense and something that could really push somebody into a life-altering a path, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think
and
at
it
that
could
point,
go one or two ways, right?
right, and that's weird. I always think that if I wasn't depressed then is what people would think. And when I share that, I don't share that to feel bad. I think everyone has pain in their life. I share it to understand that pain is pain, and we all have it. But it was when I actually started progressing in life. I graduated from college university with a 3.8, and got a degree in psychology. I wanted to help people like myself.
Yeah.
And then, I started building a career and having financial success and became the father that I always wanted, became the stepfather that I didn't have. And so as I started to progress in these areas, I started getting really lost. And I came home one day really frustrated, not being understood at work, and I said, my stepdaughter said, "You seem really frustrated." I said, "Well, imagine everyone's running a race and people start falling behind. What emotions do they experience?" And she said, "Well, fear and anger and frustration." I said, "Yep."
Anxiety.
Now imagine they're way ahead. How do they feel? And some adults have said on top of the world, but my daughter was smart. She actually realized the same way. And that was the first time I realized that success could feel like failure if we're not given the right tools. Intelligence we're born with, but emotional intelligence, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, the most emotional intelligence training I got was, if you don't like the meal at your grandma's house, just don't eat it.
Yeah.
If you get a gift you already have, don't worry, pretend you like it.
Pretend you like it. But it's very interesting you said that, and because I know this is on what one might seem as a minuscule kind of relation to what you just said, but even like in sports or playing video games, when you were playing Super Mario Kart, you're ahead, and what you're focusing on in those moments is not screwing up.
Yes.
Not dropping the
Good
ball.
job, yeah.
You're a football player, and you've just you caught that Hail Mary, and you're running 50 yards, and
Don't
you're
get tackled. Don't get
but
tackled.
people are
Yeah.
behind you and chasing you and chasing you and chasing you, and that's kind of like life. You're so focused on not dropping that ball that sometimes those emotions can overcome you.
Very much so, and I think I call it being emotionally full. When things are happening in my life was problems with workplace and problems with family and problems with, all the things, the areas in life that we were trying to juggle started to fall apart. And that was the first time I thought a lot about suicide and dealing with my pain, but that was the first time I actually started really planning it. And so as I escaped that, I stumbled upon what I really wanted to do, which was helping people be happy. I realized through a friend that, it's not about not being depressed. It's not about not being suicidal. It's not about not having anxiety. It's about living the life we want. If you have children, I have a child, whatever. We say to our kids something along the lines when they say, "What do we do with all these gifts I've been given? What do I do?" And then we always say to our kids something like, "It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you're happy." Yeah, and a lot of people finish that, and I think that's when I realized happiness is a large component. That we're not learning how to be happy. We're confused about what happiness is, and I think instead of focusing on things like depression, which makes it worse, or anxiety, then we could start to really understand what it takes to be happy and removing some of the thoughts to connect the mind and the body.
Well, how do you like as an adult who's experienced something traumatic in their childhood, how do you see beyond the clouds? How do you kind of what's a step that people can take if they're watching this that can try to help them overcome their past, essentially?
Well, black sheep thinking, which we'll get into, is about thinking differently. So I look at how to think differently in that situation. So the first thing I realize is, I am not my experiences. Freud believed that, I think it was called determinism, where he believed that what you experience is part of what you are. That was his mindset. But that doesn't hold water when you think about how it really goes down. I mean, if you are only your experiences, if we experience the same situation in the past, we should be the same learning opportunity. And that also means people can't change. And I think we would argue those things aren't true. We can change. So I started to recognize that my past wasn't my story, that it didn't define me, that our future is constantly evolving with the present minded looking towards. And I could change what I wanted instantly by saying, well, if I'm not happy with what I've had, what will I do differently? And so the first thing I recognized is I don't have to hold on to that pain anymore, that it's not a label. And then I can start to redefine who I was.
Yeah, so I think, recognizing that what you went through is powerful, and it's not something you should ignore, but also it's not something that you should really carry with you either.
Correct.
You have to understand it and know that there are similar people around you that have gone through something, similar, or maybe not exactly the same, but the way they feel about it is the same.
I think all pain is relative, and that's why I share my story. Not because I want it to be relatable. People, it's a story very relatable. I meet lots of people that are dealing with learning disability, that have been assaulted, that have been abused, that have been neglected. And so I think understanding that we all experience pain is such an important part of understanding that we're not alone, even though sometimes we feel it.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're going to take our first little break here, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about the black sheep thinking and what that means, and a little bit more about Morgan's message.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
Hello everyone, my name is Jermaine Chambers, and I'm very excited to tell you about the newest political and current affairs program coming here to Brampton. It's called On Point.
The first step of true reconciliation is learning more about one another.
Join us on Tuesdays from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. as we discuss all the issues.
I will never forget the trust you put in me.
Municipal, provincial, federal, and any issue of national importance we will talk about on Point. So do join us.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. Before we get into our next segment, we had a comment from Simone asking, how determined are you? And I think what she means is it comes down to when you want to overcome your past and really move forward with your life, it really comes down to how determined are you, right?
I think a lot of people think determination is, resiliency has been connected with this, obviously, and overcoming, but I mean, there's been times where I felt completely hopeless, and I think people feel that. And so determination is a great word. I think it's important that we feel that, but I think at times we get so attached to going somewhere different that we don't take stock of where we are and resolve those things before trying to push forward.
That's a really great answer, because as she was asking that question, I was thinking like tenacity. In the sales world and in the business world, you always think about tenacity, determination,
right?
And you just kind of opened my mind, and I think this is what this whole conversation is about: is perception. You've opened my mind, because what I'm thinking about is determination is a destination.
Yes.
It's almost not like you're abandoning, but it's almost like you're just headed in one way to get over something, but maybe you're not necessarily dealing with it.
Right. That's why I'm actually not a big fan of goals. Like, I think goals are a reminder of what we're not. It's not the saying you can't have a target.
Yeah.
Something that's like, I want to do this far in the distance. But when you look every day at what you're not, that can cause a lot of pressure on you. And I think that kind of self-pressure is what burns people out in trying to achieve, rather than having gratitude and moving forward.
Yeah.
Being too worried about what's next rather than what is.
Right. Okay. Well, great. And thanks, Simone. I really appreciate you commenting and tuning into the show. So let's get into the mindset. What is black sheep thinking?
Yeah, exactly. What is black sheep thinking? So when I did a toilet paper charity. You can't speak all of a sudden. I did a toilet paper charity.
It's a tough one.
TP the Town, we call it. Yeah. TP the Town was a toilet paper charity that I discovered when I was in a food pantry, and I asked a woman, if I could give you anything to make your life easier, what would it be? And she immediately said toilet paper. And in the last 4 years, it's a little passion project that's sparsely spread across Canada from east to west coast. And after raising about 1 million rolls of toilet paper through everyone's help, my mom called me one time, and I was going through a real dark period and just trying to figure out who I was, and knowing I was special but I didn't fit in. And she said, "You're such a black sheep." And I was like, "Mom, that's the outcast." And she said, "No, Morgan, black sheep have rare wool, so they're never killed for their meat. They live long, luxurious lives. Your mind is your wool."
Wow.
And that was kind of the first time I realized, like, you're right. Like, I knew I had skills. I knew I was special. I think we're all genius of something.
Yeah.
But we just sometimes don't feel we fit. It's this weird dichotomy of wanting to fit but wanting to be different.
Right.
And so it was learning. So black sheep thinking became about the acceptance and the balance of that, and helping people think differently and limiting themselves from what Maslow called self-actualization. So I take people from the bottom rung of understanding material abundance and health and having a better mindset on that, self-esteem, relationships, career, and then ultimately what they call self-actualization, which I think is a fancy term these days for philanthropy and becoming a humanitarian. In other words, not worrying about yourself and just worrying about the helping others through the experience.
Right. And with everything like social media and influencers and what it seems it takes to live a happy life,
right?
The majority of it is surrounded by material things.
Yeah,
and we were talking off air
about. I was just gonna bring that up.
Well, it's okay to want something,
yes,
but it's not necessarily okay to think that it will actually bring you happiness, right?
Yeah, don't tie it to your happiness. I think that people think happiness when they're not happy. It's usually three reasons. They're comparing and contrasting to other people.
Mm-hmm.
They've time bound it. They said, "I'll be happy when." Or they're living a life that somebody else wants them to. So when you start putting things like, I'll be happy when I get a bigger home, I'll be happier when I have a nicer car, or I'll be happy when I'm doing what Bob's doing, I think those things limit what happiness is. It's not so much about having. I think happiness, and what I've seen and what I've researched, is more about contentment, acceptance, and understanding. Mm-hmm. A lot about loving yourself and others, even when we feel we or they don't deserve it at times.
Right.
So it's understanding.
So then what are kind of things that we can kind of use to strive for, in a sense? Okay, so
how do we think like a black sheep thinker? Is that
right? Well, how do we find out? So I do want a bigger house. So how can I untie that to my happiness?
So one thing I help people understand is there's nothing wrong with wanting something.
Right.
But when you make it your obsession rather than working diligently and knowing that all we control is this present moment. So in the present, if you're happy, happiness is your superpower. You work harder, you retain more information, you'll be healthier. All those things would contribute to financial success. So it's really having an understanding that the small steps that you're taking daily will lead to your goals. In other words, there's a bit of faith there. Mm-hmm. You have to believe in yourself. And I think self-love has a lot to do with that. Understanding that inner critic that's going on in your head of you're not good enough, you don't deserve it, that needs to dissolve.
Okay. So before we came on air, we had a little bit of a really good chat, actually.
Oh, yeah, we did.
And
thank you.
The thing that we've been hearing a lot about these days is the anxiety that young men kind of go through. Mm-hmm. A good friend of mine actually has a private Facebook group. His name's Connor, and it's Man Talks Community, and it's a place where men. And I feel like if I was really to project this on social media, I would get like a lot of hate mail. Mm-hmm. But it's a community where men can kind of talk to other men about their issues, because, like it or not, there's a lot of is that a word? Demasculation?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
In young men these days, and it's mainly because I'll be honest with you, there's not a whole lot of housework that I do around. You know what I mean? Like cut the grass or build a shed. And sometimes when you're watching movies where the average husband is doing those types of things, and it can affect you, or there's other guys at work who are making more money than you, so you have that perception that they're providing for their family better than you, right? So are you seeing? We were talking about how you work with a lot of women.
About 60%. It's almost split, but it's more women.
And is that because men are kind of afraid to approach the situation?
I think it's getting over time. I would say only in the last few years we're seeing a growth in men's mental health groups and the importance. I mean, the stats show that suicide is up in 71% in the past 10 years. Those numbers are
insane.
Yeah, we're the most medicated society of all time, and that suicide will affect more likely men, especially younger men. And I think historically we haven't had a chance to really express our emotions. I mean, even in school, when I took sociology and gender studies, it was a lot about the patriarchy of male and the problems we caused, and not so much about how I have to like football and beer and know how to build stuff, like you said. And so we have these gender roles that we haven't, that have kind of impacted us in some way, and being more emotional and crying, and when we hurt ourselves, it's like suck it up and those kind of things. So I think it's changing. I have a men's health group, actually, emotional intelligence group, a friend of mine, Brent, runs back home in Kingston, and I think it's an amazing thing, and we're hoping that we can continue to grow that. I think everyone needs a space to understand that they can, once they get it out, they don't have to live it.
Right.
They don't have to hold their past anymore as part of their journey.
And especially, it might be different. Obviously, we're on the tail end on the millennial scale. Right. But even so, when I was growing up, I'm 32, growing up in the 80s, early 90s, right? It was something that guys didn't talk about. Right. Right. And that was one of the exceptions where I didn't. My youngest brother and sisters, they were 10, 15 years younger than me. Right. So it wasn't like I was forced to go find not forced, but I was almost out of the house because you needed to find camaraderie, and so I had a lot of friends, and our friend group was a great support group. We always talked. There was always the one guy who didn't want to talk, but we always talked about our feelings, and I think that's what kind of helped me throughout my journey. But sometimes when I talk about it now with the new friends that I make, they're like, "Well, hey, you know what? That's something that we don't really feel comfortable with opening up to." But I think if you had a safe space like a men's group or something like that, it could help out a lot of people.
And that's one thing about Black Sheep thinking. I because I don't believe that we are necessarily our past, because we can change and make future decisions. I do a lot of work where people don't even sometimes tell me their story. I think it's more about educating people on a healthy mind frame to move forward. What is limiting you in being happy? It's usually thoughts like, I don't deserve love, or the beating ourselves up. I have people sometimes write down things they don't like about themselves. And then I ask them, if I was to read that out loud in front of a room full of people, what would they think of me?
Yeah.
And they say, well, you would be a jerk. And I was like, yeah. So why are you allowed to be a jerk to yourself
right.
When you wouldn't allow it from somebody else? And nobody else would. So we don't believe in bullying, but a lot of us are bullying ourselves right now, and that changes everything. The way we treat ourselves reflects in how we treat other people. We think we're hiding it well, but we're not. And it's not selfish to love yourself. It's selfish to expect someone else to do it for you.
Right.
And so why would I treat you better than you treat yourself? You know yourself the best. You have to live with yourself. But if we don't start defining who we really are, and by starting to raise the bar and creating that boundary, then we're not going to get the love that we deserve.
I agree. And like I said before, I think, people ask me all the time, why do we do the show? Why do I help people? Like, we've got private realtor groups where, I spend a lot of time answering questions, even though I'm relatively new in the business, or just genuinely offering my help.
Right.
And I think it goes to what you said with the suicide rates, with the depression. I think that if we can just help one person know that there's more to life than their current situation,
yes.
or hey, this one topic that we brought up, or this one tip that we brought up could help change your business or change your lives, then it's worth it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think people know that there's more to life than their current situation.
I actually think that's what legacy is. I mean, if we look at even recently, like the Sir John A. Macdonald scandal, the whole thing that the country went. Yeah. So we realized, like, not even creating a country of freedom can leave you a legacy. And I tell my kids, be careful what legacy you try to leave. Things fade. Statues, we walk by of famous people we don't even recognize. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that will last forever is who you are and who you help along the way.
Right.
I think Robin Sharma said that. And so I always think about what you just said. When you help that one person, there's a butterfly effect. There's a ripple, because it's kind of the paying it forward concept that we know makes a big difference. And if you can shift someone's life just in helping them think differently, it's not that you're a hero. It's that you've created a new pathway that they didn't consider, or a roadway that now they have options. And I think we talked about outside. So the opposite of fear isn't bravery. When you're afraid of doing something, it's clarity. It's knowing what to do and knowing that there's an option.
Yeah, and it's all about creating that mindset to be able to recognize those situations, I think.
Right.
Right. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more with Morgan about how his own life can be related into his work.
Sounds great.
My name is Trish Curling, and I am an online coach, personal trainer, and yoga teacher, and your new host of Shaping Life, which is all about understanding that we have the ability and the control to take charge of our health and wellness. But we can't do it alone, and I can't wait to sit down with the best in the industry. Please tune in every Friday at 1 p.m. live here on the TCN Network.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. May your dreams all come true. Happy birthday to you.
We refuse to promote, report on anything negative in the community.
Oh, and we're back. Before we left, we were talking about, how your own life, kind of, you learn from your own life. And
how I went through
what you're teaching the people that you work with. So go into a little bit of the history of how this all came to be, your past career, and then, because this wasn't what you're about to go into, it's a serious conversation, and I'm very happy that you're sharing it
thank you for the
with myself and our guests. But just kind of walk it through.
So I just wanted to help people when I was young because I knew what it was like to be in pain. I think a lot of us are there. So as I graduated from school and started looking for help, I was like, how can I make a difference? And I started working in Employment Ontario, helping people find jobs. Worked there for 3 years very successfully, but realized I was helping people make more money, and they weren't appreciative of the work. I mean, the average employment counselor had to find 4 people a job a month and keep them there for a year as part of the funding. Right. I was averaging close to 20 a month with a higher percentage retention, but then they said you should go to the corporate world.
Right.
And so I looked into finance. I stumbled upon finance and worked there, and had a very successful career in finance for over a decade. And I was making money, and I was acquiring the things I thought if I had nicer things and I had experience. And so, but I was still incredibly unhappy. And I remember writing something when I went through a massive depression saying that who I was, right? How I became perceptive and sensitive to people. Why wasn't I finding what I wanted? Why wasn't I happy? And I come to realize that 6 months later, finding that letter, I realized there was a hole in my heart, but it was my job to fill it and no one else's.
Right.
And I was trying to do what they call one-night syndrome, which is like, if you help people, it will fill you up. And because it's very rewarding to make a difference in people's lives. We all want to do it.
Right.
Many of us do. But for me, I've recognized the difference between willing it and offering help. I think the difference is when I was younger, I was like, take this because I need it as a drug fix almost. It was like an addiction to try to heal myself, rather than becoming aware of
sincerity was almost lost.
Almost. Yeah. And so I had to once I learned to love myself and accept all my good, bad, and ugly and realized it was fine the way I was, then it became about offering something, and if they take it, great. If not, that's fine too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the dissolution of I think the ego gets in play. There's a lot of things that happen in life that we're hard on ourselves about because maybe we feel we need love. And so we become a needy person or we become angry. But that comes from a spot of love. When we become needy, it's because we wanted to love or be loved. And so that gets hurt and we get sick in that way and those things happen. So for me, I think I had a great career and a great journey, and I still, I loved what I did. But when you're dealing with, what it's like to be in a certain job where people are like, oh, he's just trying to talk to me because of a commission, or he just wants to, you're trying to help. And so those kind of like hard lessons that we all experience in business, that when I started to realize that the best thing to do for me was to be happy with where I was and love myself, everything else started to unfold. It was almost like I kind of compared it to having like invisible porcupine quills because you're so unhappy that you think you could be lovable, but you're not. And then as soon as you love yourself, it heals and people can come to you. So it's such a foundational piece. We know that with the financial side, gratitude's an amazing piece. And working in finance, the balance of that is interesting because there's this new mindset and motivation about abundance versus scarcity thinking. But I think abundance is turned into, even though it's not supposed to, it's turned into greed or a reason to just gather and hold on to resources. The opposite of scarcity isn't abundance, it's prosperity.
Right.
It's having enough, it's knowing what you need. And so that comes back to really understanding yourself and going like, I don't need all of it. I need what I need, and knowing there's more abundance is knowing there's more once you have run out of what you need, that you can create more by manifesting that, and that not the accumulation of assets.
Yeah. So the whole thing is and you hear that in movies, you hear that in taglines, you hear it on memes. You truly can't help others until you've helped yourself, and that's kind of what you were experiencing.
Yeah, that was my own personal experience, to lift myself up and stay balanced.
Yeah, and
no meds, no anything like that.
You're even so when you started to have the suicidal thoughts, was that when you were just doing finances, or when you were trying to help others but you weren't fully ready? Was it before?
It was before that. So I was in finance, and I was dealing with workplace bullying and more conflict, and even though I was very successful, you know what it's like. A lot of people who've experienced success or are watching, you might feel like you're hated even more. I mean, my aunt's a very successful woman in Toronto. She said, Jay-Z even said this, the more success you have, the more people will hate you. Yep. Haters love us in a special way, though. And so when I started experiencing that, I realized, like, wow, even though I escaped all this stuff I thought was pain, and I'm here, why am I not happy? And the suicidal thoughts and the planning of that really came about because of feeling I was emotionally full. It wasn't just one thing. I was resilient enough to get past one thing I knew because I'd done that my whole life. But my wife was sick, and my mom had a heart attack, and I was diagnosed with cancer, and my work was falling apart, and I was failing this, and I was such a bad streak that if we were having coffee, I'd go to reach for it and spill it on you.
Yeah.
It was just, I felt like I kept saying I just need a win, and I think I was really embarrassed for a while. And then a friend of mine sent me someone who works with Oprah Winfrey, and she said, as a coach, she went through the same thing. She became emotionally full, and so that was a good experience for me because I learned how to be resilient as a kid, but I didn't learn how when you have many things on you all at the same time and nothing's going right. How do we survive that? Now, unfortunately, now I know. So it's
how
nice.
many business owners do you think go through those same feelings?
Yeah, I talk to business owners on a weekly basis. They all do. I mean, they think they have to beat themselves up to get to where they are, because they think because they're self-employed, if I don't stop whipping myself, I won't be as successful as I want. And I asked them, I said, well, you have kids, you want them to be successful. Is that how you work with them? And they say, no. Well, how do you, when your kid falls down, how do you nurture them? I tell them I believe in them, I nurture them, I love them. I'm like, do that to yourself. Why do you love your kid more than yourself? They look up to you to see how you will be, how they're going to treat themselves. That's how we become a parent. It's not by, more is caught than taught. I've heard that before, and I think it's true. They'll watch you, their hero, to see how you love yourself, to reflect on how they should love themselves. So it's so important.
And it's true, and it's not just your kids, it's everyone around you. Like if I could be genuine, with the audience today, my wife tells me probably a couple of times a week, Andrew, you've got a bad vibe right now. Like there's something about you that's making me anxious. And I think, especially as realtors, and you've got a lot of deadlines and timelines.
Pressures,
And, if you don't get the commission, how is it going to affect your, financial stability down the road? And sometimes those feelings just can all get, so overwhelming and so overpowering that it spills out into your loved ones, spills out to the people that you talk to, the girl at Tim Hortons who's giving you your coffee, when really those interactions with other people I truly believe should be happy ones.
Yes.
Right? So how can...
I got a lot to say on that.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So for one thing I learned is you can worry, you can work. So first thing I realized is I can worry or I can work, but I can't do both.
Right.
I can't do both. So I just learned about
wow,
if it's in the
you can't do
you
both.
can't worry or work. So I just started working when I had a problem. Like I would never worry about the next day either. Like don't worry about the future. The future you'll deal with when you get there. I just worried about what can I do now to impact. And if I keep present-minded, which is becoming a cliche, but if we just stay where we are, the only time frame we can control and work, a lot of that goes away. And I think you're bang on. We have to recognize that the way we feel. But then Alan Watt says, the way I let that go is Alan Watt said that a man must look, or a person must look at two things: their death, completely contemplate it, their death, and that everything we do is selfish. And it's just a thought process. But when you play out your death, then you realize that life is not as meaningful as we try to make it that way. Like its only meaning is that we give it. So if we're giving it stress or anxiety or status or deadlines, if we think that's important, when we realize it's not as important as we make it, like we back off for a second and go, what am I really shortening my life over? No one's going to... Remember, most people are working really hard at a job that if you died, you'd be replaced within a week or two.
Right.
And they're sacrificing their health and their family. Yeah, exactly. Like most of us are very replaceable, and that doesn't mean we're not important. It just means we don't have to take ourselves so seriously. More laughter, more play. Don't worry about those things because they're not in the big picture of your life. They're very relevant. And so when you realize that, in 100 years no one will really know we existed, then what do you want your experience to be? Well, I don't want it to be about stress and deadlines. I still have those things, but I just don't take in consideration that I have to have an emotional attachment to an outcome. I just do the best you can. And if you lead with hard work and intent and love and kindness, all that stuff replicates through your work. And we see it with people who are happy. And I've seen it in my own life when I've made that turn from I hate my life, I want to kill myself, I'm not worthy of love, to I have tons of love to give myself and others. Once you we fill other people's buckets by saying kind things, but we have to, it's the old oxygen mask thing, we have to put it on ourselves. So that self-care, that self-love makes sure our bucket's full enough that we can then, when you can give it to your wife, you can give it to your friends, you can give it to your people, your clients. That's how you change lives, is living the example.
Right. And also, I think finding that perfect balancing act Because even I told you I was up at the cottage. We spent a couple of days up at the cottage, and driving home, kids in the car, kids laughing, singing, wife singing and laughing. It just hit me. I'm like, wait, one day this is all going to be over, and one day I'm not going to be here anymore, let alone my son.
Right.
But you know what I mean? Eventually, 100, 200 years, everybody you know is not going to be here.
Right.
There's no more experience, there's nothing. And I started freaking out. And then about 10, 15 minutes later, and this happens like once a week for me, but then 10, 15 minutes later, it's like, okay, well now you just realized how minuscule these small things are. Now you've just realized how important family is, how important laughter is, and happiness.
There you go.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to kind of come back to that. And we've got a couple of more stories to go over. So
great.
At Benjamin Law, we understand the real cost of personal injuries. As the victim of an accident, you may be the one who's physically hurt, but your main concern is that your family are the ones who will pay the price. Benjamin Law will be there for you, helping, supporting, and working tirelessly to resolve your personal injury case. Call 1-855-899-4878 or visit benjaminlaw.ca and let our family of lawyers help your family.
Hello everyone, my name is Jermaine Chambers, and I'm very excited to tell you about the newest political and current affairs program coming here to Brampton. It's called On Point.
The first step of true reconciliation is learning more about one another.
Join us on Tuesdays from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. as we discuss all the issues.
I will never forget the trust you put in me.
Municipal, provincial, federal, and any issue of national importance we will talk about on Point. So do join us.
And we're back. Thank you guys for sticking in with me. We have a gentleman, Sean Gordon.
Yeah.
He commented. He said the force is strong with you, Morgan. Always love listening to what you have to say.
I love you,
and,
Sean.
You know, I'm very happy that I just read that, because it kind of leads into what I want to talk about next, is what you say, what you do, the connection that you build with others. For anybody who's tuned into this show before, you know I talk about, I used to work for LA Fitness, and I owe a lot to the structure and organization of my business, and the sales and the connection and relationships that you build with your network. I owe that to my managers and VPs and the culture of LA Fitness and that American style of the corporate world, essentially. And I went up to my VP the first week, and I said, hey, can I get a business card? Like, how do people know what I'm about? How do people know how to get a hold of me? How do people know, what it is that I represent? And he went like this. He said, this is your business card. And I never really knew what he meant by that.
Right.
And eventually I said, oh, it's not what it says on a piece of paper. It's about the connections that you make and the message that you bring.
Right.
And so we were talking off air about Socrates and
they didn't write things down. There's not a lot of written work by them, and the reason why is because they said the quality of the work is the conversation, and that's a lot of the work we do, because people have their own thoughts. And so I believe we're kind of two things. We're not our thoughts, but we spend a lot of time in our head. And when we can dismantle those things, those limiting beliefs or the excuses or the inner critic, then what's left over is who we really are. Mm-hmm. And that can be an opportunity to heal and love yourself. And so a lot of the work I do is having those conversations one-on-one or in group settings where people can say stuff like, but how do I deal with people when I give all the love but they don't give it back to me? Or how do I deal with the fact that like I'm frustrated and I'm not being heard? Those are the kind of things that are really important that prevent us from overcoming those things and becoming truly happy. So it's what you said, it's this work. There's not a booklet, or there's lots of great books out there I can recommend, and they can find if they want to reach out to me that I recommend, because I wish I wrote some of them.
Right.
But I think the most part, a lot of the work has to be done in a conversation style that allows people to heal and think and reflect and be heard and to hear themselves. and be held accountable for who they really are versus who they think they are because they're hurt or they're struggling in life.
Right. Okay. Well, you are what, you know, you are, what's that saying? You are what you, or you think what you are.
Yeah, what I am, what I think, therefore I am. Is that, yeah. Well, you know, I think we aren't our thoughts. That's what one thing. You know, we aren't our thoughts. If we were our thoughts, sometimes I don't know who I'd be.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah, because we can't control our thoughts. We can only control how we respond to them, and how we manage them. And I think most people don't know that. They think, oh, I'm so depressed. They think negatively. It's like, well, you know, it's hard these days not to be depressed. We talked about it before about like fractured culture and dopamine from Facebook and polluted oceans and more plastic in the sea than water and days you can't exercise. Like if you're not a little bit depressed, but don't avoid depression, you lean into it and understand the message.
So how can Black Sheep Thinking, how can you, Morgan, how are you helping others? So I mean, you do public speaking and you do
I do workshops. I do one-on-one coaching. They can reach me through my website. I'm even partnered up with a spa right now in Napanee called Touch of Wellness Spa, and owner Joey McCormick. And Raphael Gomes, he actually runs a place called Lilac Hill. It's up in Tweed, and it's a place where people can come, 14 people, you know, C-suite management team, sometimes family, sometimes groups. They come, relax their bodies, rest on the resort, and then we go through mental training when they've kind of leveled themselves to actually rebuild.
How do you do that? Do you just help clients or people who are looking to, you know, kind of manage their thoughts, I guess?
Most people come to me when they are stuck, like they feel like they're doing the work and they're like, I can't get past, I just can't find happiness. I keep stumbling, you know, if they're climbing towards it and fall. They climb towards it and fall, and they just feel like they need an extra boost. And so it's not so much, you know, I think there's a difference between mental illness and mental health. Mental health is like going to the gym, working out versus a critical illness. So we all want mental health. We all want to be healthy. And so when people are struggling with their mental health or they're struggling with happiness, they contact me and I understand what they're struggling with, and we start working on different strategies to not just think differently, but to overcome whatever's happening in their life. So it's the thought process and the action steps to get where they really want to be.
Do you find it's easier for, you know, especially adults, to do private sessions or group? I mean, a lot of people probably want to start out by just doing something a little bit more private, or is it more helpful to be surrounded by like-minded individuals that are sharing the same experiences?
I think both are valid, actually. Yeah. So when we do a lot of group work and when we do culture work, so a lot of people that hire us through this, what's called the Genesis project, they come and work. When they come to that suite or the spa, they're looking for culture shifts. People contact me one-on-one when they're dealing with things like past trauma in their childhood, maybe current struggles they're facing in their lives.
Rat race.
Yeah, the rat race. Yeah, the achievers that have are facing burnout, or they have anxiety or depression they're trying to shift from. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of different cases. Interesting because, I mean, some things I understand to refer are past me, but a lot of things are really dealt with at the level of the mind that they come to, and they realize if I could just think differently about it, I could start to heal. And so they're looking for a new pathway, or they're looking for something. So those people, you know, if it's personal, it's one-on-one. If I don't really, when it comes to group, it would have to be a shared experience that makes sense. Yeah. But when I do a workshop and a talk, I think what I talk about is so basic on what I call Carl Jung called it the unconscious collective. It's that line between all of us that brings us together as humans. Because we say happiness is different for everyone. I've heard that, but I don't agree with that.
The feeling is the same.
Not just the feeling, but the things that cause it. If I said, would it make you happy if you had material abundance and health, and relationships were healthy, and you loved yourself, and you had a career purpose, and you were giving to others? They'd be like, yes, well, that's all. I think for the most part, that's most of society. Yeah. And so we focus on what makes us different in our experiences that make us happy, of like, I like to ride horses, or I like to go roller coasters. That's not happiness. Those are experiences that can make you happy, but that's not happiness, I think. And so when we look at what that common bond is, and we focus on that, that can be in a group or one-on-one. But people call me one-on-one when they want to share or deal with something that's very close to a personal thing.
And you talked about, we're kind of running out of time, but you talked about earlier bullying in the workplace.
Yeah.
Is that something that's still prevalent?
I think especially in sales cultures where it's like very much push and numbers and numbers.
Is it more of a perception that's based on that particular individual, or do you think that it's something that is kind of culturalized?
That's a great question. I think it's really still in the culture. I do. I think that we're pushed harder for sales and numbers with social media coming fastest. I don't think it's bullying, like someone calling you a name, but I think there's a lot of, sometimes if it's a male work environment, it could be a lot of macho there. There's still that exists, unfortunately. But I think it's changing, and I think it's becoming harder to do that. But you don't realize it, an environment is toxic sometimes until the job's burnt you out or it's too late.
I agree.
I want to make you an honorary member of the Black Sheep Thinking family. So here's the sheep and the pin that you can wear. If you ever see someone with that pin, they're a Black Sheep Thinker. I hope all of you join the herd. Come and check us out.
Well, you know what? Before we go, I just wanted to, and before we do our plugs and everything like that.
Yeah, of course.
If there's we've got I think this is one of the largest groups that we've had actually watching.
Oh, great.
So for those who are listening and tuning in, and if they're dealing with something like past trauma or maybe current workplace bullying or something, anxiety, depression, other than calling you, what's the first step that they can use to help kind of overcome these really suppressive
thoughts? I would say take a break first.
Take a break.
Yeah, take a break. Relax. Treat it like you're sick. Like you have a cold. And then I would start to look at mind, body, spirit, and heart. Look in those 4 areas where you can contribute. So I would read a good book. I think there's a great book called Unf Yourself by Gary John Bishop. The Help Being a Critic. Great book. 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. Great book. I would eat healthy. I would just start to take baby steps into nurturing yourself again. Do your exercise, change your state. There's a lot of things you can do. Matter of fact, at the end of the year, we're going to have something come out you can download from the website.
Great.
That's called the Happiness Switch, where we want to create a template where you would fill out questions that when you're having a hard time, you can go back and start following the steps that you already agreed to create an authentic, happy environment. We know happiness is a choice, but when life's falling apart, it doesn't feel authentic. And so I think that's the answer to your question, which is create an authentic environment slowly that you can start to be happy again.
Okay, that's awesome. Now, plug time. Where can we find you?
Well, you can check out our website. You can contact me through blacksheepthinking.ca. And all my socials are Black Sheep Thinking, black with no vowels, sheep with no vowels, BLCK.
That's a good way to explain it.
Thinking.
S. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
and
good.
Black Sheep Thinking, no vowels in Black Sheep, but all the vowels in thinking.
Yeah, okay. So, and if you're a brokerage owner, a business owner, they can actually hire you to speak, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a great thing for clients because it's something different, and they walk out of there feeling happy and inspired. And nothing makes a better client than a happy client that's well-rounded and happy. So with their lives.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and especially Morgan. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
man.
Thank you. You're doing great work.
Learned
for people.
a lot,
thank you.
and
you're a great guy.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Okay, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in. That's another episode. We'll see you next time.